In this topic, we're going to discuss Azure deployment considerations, specifically around how do we update our application once we have it running in Azure. So one of the things is to think about the differences between the different offerings that we have here. We have PaaS and IaaS, and actually inside of PaaS, we have two different ways to actually do these deployments. And so we're going to talk through that a little bit, and what are some of the differences between there, and what are the things you need to consider when you're using these to update your applications in Azure. Now, I'd like to start off with the traditional PaaS rule. So if we have our application up here, and here's our PaaS application. So if we have a web role that's running here, and this is running our web role. Now, once we have this running up here in Azure, when we actually deployed it to Azure, we have to deploy it to a slot. So we have this notion of deployment slots. And with traditional PaaS, we have two of these. So we have one that's called production, and the other that's called staging. Now, what happens is, whatever tool that we use to do our deployment, it could be PowerShell, it could be our release management tools with Visual Studio, or it could be something like Web Deploy. We're going to target one of these slots. We have to in order to expose this. So by default, it's going to go to the production slot. And what happens is, we actually take our code, we're going to deploy it up here, and this has a URL tied to it, right? And that's the name of our cloud service by default when we name it. We could obviously use vanity names as well to better showcase what our application is. But then we also have a URL down here for staging. And the URL for staging by default is the same as our application, but it also has staging tagged into it. And the purpose of this is this model. So once we have deployed this to production, we've done our test, we haven't even released it to users yet. Once we've tested it, we said, yes, this is good for production, we're ready to go with this. That gets exposed to the world, people start using our application. So we have our end users coming in here using our application. And our end users look like something happened to their neck. So the end users are over here, they're accessing our production site, and we need to make an update to it. So we have a code fix, we have something that comes along, and so when we do that, we can actually deploy to the staging slot here. When we deploy to that, now we have, let's say, V1 code running here, and now we have V2 code running here. So we can test that, and we can say, yep, everything looks good. We can certify, we can have our UAT testing happen against that, or user acceptance testing. And then once they say, yes, it's good, we can do what's called a swap. And the swap can either be orchestrated through PowerShell, release management, or a REST API. There's a whole variety of ways to do it, just like we can deploy. But the swap will say, change this URL pointer to actually point down here now, instead of pointing to production. And so in that case, we've now just instantly released our website. And we were able to test it before we released it. So it makes a great model for release management.
So Cale, I have a question. I think you said initially that we could just had prod and staging by default, right?
Yep.
So is it possible to add on to that? Because a lot of times I've had customers that have dev, test, QA prod. Can we expand on that?
Sure. So the question was, can we take these and expand upon those slots? So in our traditional PaaS, which would be our web and worker role, we can't change these. These are locked. That's just the way they are. But if we're working in a web app model, and I'll go ahead and put a dashed line here to show this, in the web app model, we can have up to 5 of these. And the interesting thing about the web app is we name these. So these are user named. So we can name them whatever we want. We can change the names at will. We can name whatever we want. They won't be default to production and staging. And that gives you the flexibility of having up to 5 of these, like I said. And then you can choose which ones you want to swap between.
Oh, nice.
So if you have 5 different builds of your application running out there, you could actually have them running simultaneously and flip between whichever one you want to expose the right one. So it makes for a great deployment model.
But only for web apps.
So for web apps, it's 5. For traditional PaaS applications, it's 2. Then when we talk about IaaS, just to kind of close out the discussion on deployment, IaaS can actually be the target of a web deploy. And we mentioned web deploy too. That's a tool that can either be triggered from release management, or it can be triggered from inside Visual Studio from a developer type situation. IaaS can actually be a target of that because it's a simple push. It's going to push that code up to that application server if it's running IIS. But it doesn't involve any of these deployment slots. So that's the kind of thing that you lose when you're talking about infrastructure as a service versus PaaS or platform as a service. We have a lot of this orchestration built in here to do this. This sits on top of our normal deployments where we can do basically we can either upgrade or walk the stack whenever we're doing an upgrade using the upgrade domains. So these deployment slots sit on top of that, and it's really a release management type function.
So when you have the web deploy, how do you get it from your Visual Studio up to Azure?
So good question. So when we are sitting in Visual Studio, when we do a web deploy, we keep talking about our web publish. We actually have to sign in with some credentials, and when we do that, we're actually generating a management cert in the background in Azure. That management cert then is installed on our client, our Visual Studio, and that's what's used for authentication when we go to push that site up there. That's for the PaaS applications, or the traditional PaaS. If we talk about web apps, the Kudu site is actually what functions to push whenever we're doing a web deploy from a website or a web app from Visual Studio.
So I think with websites, we can do like an FTP and things like that. There's some other options to move that.
Yeah, definitely. And as we mentioned in one of the other topics about Kudu, Kudu is the one that exposes those FTP endpoints and allows us to go ahead and copy those files up there on the fly.
It's all coming together now.
It's all coming together. And with that, that completes the topic on Azure deployment considerations.